Hello, everybody, and welcome to another series in our Colour in the Creative Industry discussions in conjunction with the AOP. Today, we are really excited. We've got a fantastic guest, and I'm going to read you out literally a little bit about him, and we're going to get cracking with this discussion. Khandola is a renowned fine art photographer and principal lecturer at Nottingham Trent University. He has published 4 monographs and exhibited his photographic work internationally, engaging in complex visual stories and politics of representation. Max, amazing to have you, man. Thank you so much for giving us your time. How are you doing today?
It's my pleasure. I'm very good, thank you. Thank you very much. And as thank you for the introduction. And I said it's a real pleasure to be a part of this. Thank you.
Well, Max, we really wanted to get you on the show because obviously, as people can see, we're all Indian here. And we've faced our own kind of journey getting into the industry, and I know you have too. And you know, we thought it'd be great to get to know a little bit more about you, how you got into the industry, and being a lecturer and engaging with so many, you know, up and coming creatives at a young age. You can tell us something about the industry that we don't know ourselves, the insights that we're really interested in getting from you. So let's start with the beginning. How did it all kick off? How did you get into photography? Coming from a Punjabi background, exactly the same as us. What was it like? How did your family respond? Tell us it all.
Well, I think we've all been through this sort of a roller coaster when your parents want you to do really well. And the STEM subjects are, you know, we can look at the sciences, technology, engineering, maths, because like yourselves, it's either law, medicine, the sciences, going into accountancy. So at the beginning, I went into the sciences, and it was difficult, but my inspiration was my brother. My brother actually got into Manchester Metropolitan. I think it was called Manchester Metropolitan at the time. And he was 4 years older than me, and he was so out there. I mean, the way he looked at that time, he was a cross between Mick Jagger, Freddie Mercury, and a lot more like Freddie. He looked amazing. The unfortunate thing was some distant family members talked my mother out of him going to art school. His portfolio was stunning. He was a very good silkscreen printer. His lino cuts. He was really out there critically, and also within the context of looking at things from a different perspective. So my brother's a major an influence. And then actually I'm and talking to my parents, I actually just sat them down and said, I need to do something different I'm really passionate about. And the same sort of dialogue occurs. How are you going to make money? How are you going to make money, son? And I said, look, bear with me. I went to Bourneville College of Art. My tutor there was John Hodgetts, an inspiration. And then from there, I enrolled at Wolverhampton Polytechnic under the tutelage of Nick Hedges, who was absolutely fantastic. He social documentary photographer. And it was there that we started to look at the politics of representation, issue-based work. And even then, making work, going into the library, I was sort of looking at art, and generally the library was just an access to mostly European art. You only touched on Islamic or Indian art within the context of textiles. So anything else was not there. So the Bill Brandts, the Ansel Adams. I came across the work of Bruce Davidson, 110th Street in Harlem. So you had a white photographer making work of black ghettoized areas in New York, which was a distant cry to where I was. So it started from there. And then while I was at Wolverhampton, I put my shift in. I worked from 7. I remember the caretakers, the cleaners, bless them, used to let me in. And a friend of mine at the time, James O'Davis, we'd park ourselves in the darkroom at 7:30 in the morning and work from 7:30 till about 9, 10 in the evening, printing black and white or color. I became quite good at black. I'm quite handy at black and white printing. I should do more of it. But what happened there was I was always looking at how to advance my work? Where do I go? And at the time, professional practice or working within the industry wasn't quite on the curriculum. I remember at the year 3, when I was at level 2, I think it was Neville Brody came in from The Face and did a talk. And I wanted to go to the talk, but I missed it. But it just so happened as I was going into the common room, I think it was called the common room, I bumped into Neville Brody. And I had a chat with Neville. He said, look, come down to the Laundry in London and do a work placement. And I did. I went and saw Phil Bicker. Quite inspiring, actually, to work in this agency. And it was only a short period, but the only sort of non-white people I saw were the couriers picking up parcels. Yeah, and this was in 88, 89.
And how did that make you feel? Like, were you immediately aware that, there's no one else like me here? What were your feelings at that time?
I think, believe it or not, I had quite a grounded upbringing from my parents, and we were told we are different. We, coming from the Punjab, India, to embed themselves in England, there's a type of trauma. It's not a visual trauma. It's an internal trauma, something that you only hear late at night, your parents sort of crying over a letter that arrives, etc. The internal trauma then manifested itself into making things very positive and to look at things very objectively. And that's what I did with everything. I am in this position. I'm very fortunate to be there. And you just look and observe. So what I looked at was what the guys at the laundry office were doing, the Face. And I wanted to do that. I wanted a part of that, absolutely. But the thing is, to be a part of that, how do you do that? Do you move to London? Do doors open for you? Who opens those doors? How connected are you? And from the beginning, the formative years of my career, you realize you had to know people who open doors for you. Very important in terms of who you know, how to get there. So after doing the placement, coming back to Wolverhampton, I just carried on developing my portfolio, and I made quite a substantial body of work. I had about 5 portfolios. I sold about 60% of my degree show work, and within about 12 months of graduating, I had various bodies of work that were collected or purchased by museums at the time. And I was very much in the area of researching a subject matter, historically, placing it within context, and then going to a place to document it. And Nick was very important at that time, Nick Hedges, my tutor, in terms of really challenging and posing questions. And Nick did say to me at the time, you should be going to Soho Road in Handsworth and photograph the Indian Punjabi community. I said, that's a very interesting idea, but you know something, I'm not just going to do that because I'm a Punjabi Indian photographer. I'll do it when I'm right. Not because you just have to go there. Why am I going there? It doesn't matter if I'm going to photograph the boxing community or say it's some ballet dancers or different types of communities, but why should I photograph a Punjabi community when for myself I have to realize why I'm doing it? So it's all that research. So you just don't do it because you're black or brown or white.
Of course.
And so I did go to Handsworth, but I didn't photograph the Punjabi community. I did other stuff. So
we were told the same thing. We were told the same thing early on, Max. Like, you guys are Indian. Why don't you go and go to Southall and shoot? And that it was actually the early stages of our Seek project was, should we just go and photograph some people in Southall? But we wanted to give it a bit more context. But something you said just before, Max, was really interesting. It's all about who you know, right? You've got to know the right people. And I'm gonna touch on this later on with you, but about the hard work kind of side, because from what you were saying, you're doing a lot of hours, you were working really hard, and we'll get to that. But the networking side is really interesting. How did you build your network? Because that is what a lot of young creatives or even creators of color sometimes find difficult, is how do you meet these people who can open the doors for you? Where are they? You know, what was your journey of doing that, and how were you successful at it? Because any photographer will know selling prints is difficult. It's hard to sell prints, right? You know, when we sold our Sikh project prints, no Indians bought our prints. It was all non-Indians, right? Because they were like, well, what am I going to do with a Sikh man on my wall? Like, it looks like my uncle. So so it's hard. How did you go about meeting the right people, and how did that lead to you selling prints?
Okay, it's hard. It's very hard, and I kept a little black book. Everyone has a black book, and I got most of my information from a magazine called Creative Review. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's still around. And what I used to do is go into the library and just deconstruct it, look at the ads, look at who was making the cutting edge work, and I just make notes. They were all in London. I think the odd person was in Manchester, no one in Birmingham. And that's how I did it. So I made a scrapbook of the advertising campaigns that I absolutely loved and saw on television, the photography. And then just to get my head around, how did that advert work? Who was involved? Would I need to work with a lighting crew? Do I have to go through an agency? So I sometimes cold called. And believe you me, they were difficult calls because the questions they posed I wasn't prepared for in terms of preparation, prepping your folio. So when I did graduate, I did go to London, and it was very hard. I did find a place to sleep. I slept on many different couches. I'm indebted also to another friend, Martin, whose place I stayed for a few months. And I suddenly realized it wasn't just the connections. It goes far deeper than that. You know, I wasn't born in London. I'm not from London. I'm born in, I call it Middle Earth, Birmingham, the land of hobbits. And so I had to rethink and re-strategize. So what I did was I opened a gallery with a friend of mine, Donovan, and we called it the Goat Gallery. And what we did, rather than me going to a place to present my work, I invited people to come to the gallery. So the gallery was very much based on, say, galleries in Soho and stuff that we've seen in Europe, especially in Paris, where there was a combination of very high fashion and art. So Donovan was holding stock of Comme des Garçons, Yohji Yamamoto, Izzy Miyake, Dirk Bickenberg, really fantastic clothing. And you had a clientele that came in. The other thing I learned very quickly was the galleries that were selling to corporate organizations. And they could be offices, law firms, fashion houses. And then to break that down, you have certain private collectors. But again, it's how you nourish that place. And just bringing it forward, fast forward, with my wife, Sarah, who's very successful in her jewelry, the way she works with clients, it's almost like within a family context. You have to really nurture your client, their needs, their wants. Everything has to be done so precisely in detail. So going back to the Goat Gallery, that's what we did. I printed my work. I found a printer who printed very much within a personal context. So rather than just handing over the negatives at the time and disappearing, I could hang out in the darkroom with him and go over the test prints. So we would do 3 test prints for me. I'd have an artist proof. And it was all done in that way of a direct selling to a client. That was really important. And in the Goat Gallery, we had certain people come in who worked within the context of, say, the legal profession. They were from medical backgrounds. We had doctors, we had footballers, we had musicians come in. But then at the same time, I opened my studio in Digbeth. And what I did every 3 months was hire a DJ, employ 4 or 5 people to serve champagne or very expensive red wine. And I would have my workout in this open plan studio, and people come and buy, and it would be a soiree. It'd be a limited of about 100 people. And it was no different to what I didn't realize at the time what was happening, say, in New York, in the meatpacking district where the galleries were opening. I just used to read about it. And I used to think, well, maybe I should do that. So if I couldn't take the work to a gallery at the time, or I couldn't find a place to sell, why not create it yourself? So the one outlet was through my gallery to represent myself. And the second one was through my studio, where I invited people. And that's when I met Mark Seeley in '91. He got notified about the Goat Gallery, what I was doing, and that's when he invited me to London. I invited him to Birmingham. And again, a different dialogue opened. So just to put what Autograph and Mark did with me in context, and Mark introduced me to many galleries in England where I had solo exhibitions and group exhibitions. He also, I made some notes here. He also introduced me for the first time to New York. I had an artist in residency, quite a prestigious artist in residency. It happens now in Lightwork, Syracuse, where I met Jeff Hoon, Gary Hesse, Carrie Mae Weems. And it was another process in your education, into managing your profile, your artwork. Syracuse is about 500 or 700 miles from New York, Manhattan. I just thought when you went to New York, everything was there in one spot, but it's not. It's so big. First time I went to Manhattan, but then also working with Autograph, my work was introduced to Houston Photo Festival, Arles, and I published my first book with Mark Seeley. He, through Autograph, my agent in New York contacted me. So that opened up an immense amount of dialogue, new directions, new areas. It was just really quite dynamic in terms of what one could do. I still had my studio and I was still selling through that. And then again, at that same time, I was also very close to another curator called Rhonda Wilson, who ran Seeing the Light and Rhubarb. And I was on the board. She invited me to be on the board. And what Rhubarb did was invite curators, picture editors to do portfolio reviews. And you would see that manifest now at Houghton, at Format Festival, various other photographic festivals up and down the country. And it was a template she used from Houston Photo Fest in terms of bringing in a critical mass. So you had curators from various fine art galleries, commercial galleries. You had picture editors from The Guardian, The Telegraph. You had historians and writings, and people would book in to have a portfolio review. So in that period, there was a lot of networking, a lot of things happening in terms of how I could manage my work. So the doors, I still had to open the door, but I think meeting Mark and opening that door was really quite significant to introduce me to a range of people.
What I really like about and thank you for going so in depth. I think it's really interesting to hear the whole story. But what I really like about your approach is that if I can't do it the traditional way, I'm going to do it my own way. You know, I'm not going to wait until, even though you had a gallery, I'm still going to do my own thing and try to sell these prints. I'm going to create the experience myself. So even though it was a creative process, it was still very much a business for you, like the champagne, creating that's a business. You're putting your customer in a certain space, you know, and making them feel good, making them feel at ease, making them feel like this is a very high class event. And obviously that leads to your work also being seen as a certain quality. So I really like that about you. And that's something that we always tell people as well, is like, if you can't do it the way that everyone else is doing it, do it your own way, make it happen somehow, some way. But and that whole process, Matt, when you were doing all that, when you were in New York, how did your color play a part? Do you think in any way it hindered you, or did it help you? Did it make you different? You know, how was that for you? Did you find any prejudice, any discrimination?
It's interesting. It's a very interesting question, because all the white artists I met there, basically said to me, keep your eyes to the ground. Don't give anyone in Manhattan or in New Jersey or in Brooklyn the eye contact. And I'm like, wow, all these things. And I've been brought up visualizing New York, like most people, through movies, classic movies. I'm addicted to movies that show Manhattan in a particular way. But I'm the opposite. I look people directly in the eye. No one batted an eyelid. People were coming to me, approaching me. The ironic thing about this, my agent, Barbara Green, who represented me, is Black. So, it happened to be a Black curator, gallerist who wanted to represent me, but she was also representing other artists. So I'm just, you have to be very proactive and confident and belief in your practice. Yes, we have quiet moments where I will go back to the hotel room and think, that didn't go quite well, or wish that could have worked better, or that print deal could have happened, or et cetera, et cetera. But we all have that, we have a front to everybody that things are very good. But behind that front, in that quiet moments, the things that don't go right.
What I wanted to touch on was something around this hard work principle, because from what it sounds like, you put in a lot of work. The meetings, even going out there, spending time networking, it takes a lot of confidence. And Amit knows this, the amount of networking we try to do, just to build up that base of people. But I want to read out something you read in an interview, because we actually get emails from people who say, look, you guys say just work hard, and as long as you work hard, you can get there. And so people object to that, saying that's not always the case for creators of color. So you said here, what will make the difference is your consistency and level of engagement, the homework you do. How many people burn the midnight oil to research a specific topic? You have to be absolutely on the ball. Now, I totally agree with that. But what would you say to those people who say, look, I'm a Black photographer, I'm an Indian photographer, I work just as hard, 3 times as hard as anybody else out there, but I'm still not getting the opportunity. I'm still not getting booking the jobs. What do you say to those people? Because even for us, it's hard to give advice, because as we all know, there's no one formula to success in this industry. There's no one moment where boom, you get the job and you take off. It just doesn't work like that. But obviously you have been around so many more creatives, around students, people that you've mentored. What advice do you give people who say, look, I do the work, man. I work as hard as I can. I'm still not getting opportunities. How do you address that question?
It's first and foremost, you have to keep your respect and dignity. And it's a fine balance of pushing it so much, but then retracting. Because if you push too much, one can become oppressive to somebody. So if I'm trying to get hold and work with a publisher, a gallery, or a historian, etc., if you keep pushing it, it becomes almost obsessive, and the person might resent that. It's a very, very fine balance. But I always say keep your respect and dignity. And what I also mean by that is you have your practice. So if out of 10 letters you get 9 rejections, you've got to absolutely knuckle down even more to work for that 10th letter to come, and you've got the job. Yeah, someone might say that 10th letter could be the 11th or the 15th, so be it. In my practice, from the beginning when I took it to London, when I had no success, so I had to open my own gallery, and then actually going back into my practice and then trying to articulate that first with Mark and then with other people, it was just having a real deep belief and faith in what you're working on and the subject matter. So most of my subject matter is about race, representation, identity, religious beliefs. So I've kept those very close in terms of I believe in that. And when you do get rejections, and there's quite a few I've had, like many photographers and artists, and no one wants to talk about it, but the rejection is something you have to encapsulate and make it work for you, because yes, someone's not actually going to invest in that body of work. However, it's my work. I've spent, for example, thinking about the work and then on location making it. So if I'm doing a landscape project, when I went to Punjab to do that, that manifested itself through Illustration of Life, which was a body of work I did on the last 4 hours of my father's death. But who wants to publish a book on death and dying, a man dying of cancer? But that project itself was very difficult in terms of the content, but then showing the work, and the first reaction I had from, say, Mark Seeley was, oh my God. I mean, he just took it on board. And the only thing we had to consider at the beginning was it was too soon after my father's death. So we had to keep coming back to the work because it is quite brutal. But then also it's quite beautiful in terms of when you look at death and dying and you start really looking at humanity and a person who has aged and then this awful disease has taken the body over, but it's still someone that you care for. But that applies to everybody. It doesn't matter what color of skin you are. So you have to have an absolute belief in your practice. And the other thing I would say is be very humble in terms of taking the work forward. If there are rejections, I always say if someone doesn't sort of want to work with you at this particular moment in time, 6 months down the road, you might do something and they want to work with you. So the idea is, for me, is to just make sure you keep working, keep the consistency, and keep people in the loop. Always keep people in the loop. So from when I was making work to now, you've got Instagram, various different platforms, social media, when one can see what everyone's doing. And even now, the amount of work I have and a lot of work that has not been out in the public domain, I just continually make work. And even now, developing my website, new work that I'm adding all the time, I've got to be very patient. I don't want to present work for the sake of it. Oh, look at this, what I'm doing, when there's lots of other contexts and things I have to manage to bring forward. It's something that I entrust and talk to my students and to say that these things take time, but it's about your confidence. It's about the knowledge and the expertise that you bring to that specific body of work, and also how you articulate and how you research and how you underpin that practice is so, so important. And the other thing is, it's when my students will say, Max, you get up at 5 a.m. to come to Nottingham? Yeah, I get up at 5, I'll catch a train at 6. I'm in Nottingham for about 8:30, have a cup of coffee, and I'm good to go. And then I don't hit the sack till about till midnight. But then also working out, when you're working for yourself, okay, I'm really privileged to work within the context of education and academia and knowledge and trend. But working on your own practice, if there's a job, I would definitely burn the midnight oil. And working with my wife, who runs a gallery, yeah, we're up late and working. So we have to make that photographic work or that object because it's for a particular client, because you entrust that client. They're going to buy from you. And you have to give that excellence and expertise. And also it's a passion that you're working in this creative field. So it doesn't matter in that sort of sense what background you come from. You have to have a real drive and belief in your practice. You really have to become so focused in what you do.
You know what? Really. I love what you said. What you said there. Your answer to that, because it's something that we used to say. Like, I remember we used to do work, and we didn't used to get the jobs, didn't book the jobs, and we always used to say to each other, "Our time will come. Our time will come." Right. So instead of taking it in a negative way and letting it bother us too much that we didn't get the job, and we couldn't. It might have been the case we didn't get the job because our names are Amit and Naroop. You know, that people knew that we're not white, and that might have caused an issue straight away. But we knew that if we keep on producing more work, our time will come. Eventually, they'll take notice, and that's exactly what happened. So that's why we say to people: just keep on keeping on. Your time will come. And you know, what you said about respecting your practice. For us, it was all about ownership of our name. Like we always said, it's going to be Amit and Naroop. We have to tell people and push this idea that we're two brown boys in this industry. That's fundamentally the first thing they're going to see when you walk into a studio on set. Hey, who are these two brown boys? Amit, ownership, respect, humility. We're big proponents of being humble, being kind. It's being kind. It's being nice. You know, it's such a rare quality a lot of times. Instead of being hung up on the negative side, just keep on producing the work. You know, and you're right. Your time will come. I read somewhere that you said many years ago I was called a black photographer, as in here's Max, here's a black photographer, right? How did that make you feel? Because I remember when people used to say, oh, here's Amit and Naroop, they're the urban guys. They do the urban black music stuff. All right. And that stage, we were so young in it. We just wanted to get paid that we just kept our mouth. So we're like, yeah, that's us. Yeah. But, you know, when you were called like, you know, you're not black, you're Indian, you're brown, right? How did that make you feel? How did you respond? Did you just take it on the chin and crack on, or did you kick up a fuss?
Well, how I answered that back when I was introduced, I just said, right, I'm the black photographer, you are my white audience. So how do we address that? So when I look at the audience, majority would be, unfortunately, 95% plus white. So is it a niche? Is it erotic that I'm on stage and also the work that I'm doing? Hopefully it's not, because I've had to beg, steal, and borrow information just to get my foot into the door, like any other photographer. So if I remember I wanted to photograph the great Emmanuel Stewart, one of the greatest boxing trainers in the world. And I used to find out what hotel rooms he was staying in. I used to fax him, all sorts of stuff. But what happened was I got a gig with them. I got an intro to Lennox Lewis, and Lennox was being trained by Emmanuel Stewart. So I got into the door and I had a chat with Emmanuel. And I said, you're the guy that used to send me the fax. I mean, yes, it is me. However, it wasn't necessarily about being black or white. For me, there was that tenacity and that need to investigate, no different than a journalist that is knocking on people's doors. So I need that contact. How do I get that? So there's always a middleman that would stop you. Because I wasn't represented, I was managing my own profile and my work. I had to do all the negotiations in terms of how I maneuvered myself and how I got into that. So when I got in with Lennox Lewis, I got access to Sky TV, Talk Sport. I was invited to everything to do this documentary on Lennox. And I spoke to Mark. Mark Seeley. Mark had access to various press and editors. And that's how it works. And again, we were talking about access. I've met most of the picture editors, and some of the stories I've done have worked, some haven't. A majority have not because of the type of work I do. But my work goes into another platform where people are buying it, or it goes into a publication. But it doesn't stop me from wanting other things and considering other things. So you keep all those in your list of things to do and tick off. And we all have a tick list, don't we?
I want to try to move on as we get into the kind of last part of this discussion, into your life as a lecturer. So obviously you're seeing all these students who are studying photography. And, you know, we always believe that you've got to try to get to these creators at a young stage and show them that there's a chance, if you are from a minority background, to make it pro. How many of your students are from a minority background? Like, what is your, you know, are they mostly white? Is there a good mix? Or and leading on from that, if you have got a certain amount of, you know, ethnic minority students, why do so few of them end up, you know, becoming pro and making it to a higher level?
The mix, again, up and down the country, it's you have mostly, I would say, white European students that do the arts. Michael, I've been at Nottingham Trent for nearly 23 years, and it's been a real privilege to be there as a senior lecturer, then heading the course for 11 years, and then moving away from that. So I've got more time to do my own research. But the demographics is quite interesting, because when students enroll, you see 100 students in your first meeting in a lecture. I always look for the different colors. I can see it, and I look at names, and I'm always inquisitive about your background, your name. It doesn't matter if you're from Poland, Italy, South America, China, Japan. But then you break that down, those are the international students, to our homegrown students, and then looking at the Black and Asian. And unfortunately, you don't have many. I've seen a subtle increase on my course, but there's lots of different questions to ask because of the curricula as well, because they're on the course and they're doing photography, but then what they've been presented with is generally a curricula that is embedded within a colonial context. So it's those long discussions. I'm very fortunate that the team I work with, because it's not just about me, it's about 11 of us that work together. We're very, very diverse in our approach, and we're very conscious of what we want to teach as a subject matter. Historically, we've brought in people like Mark Seeley, Ajamu, Kalpash Lagathri, I've put that down here with Nita Madahar, Joy Gregory. We've got a real diverse selection of people that come in and inform the curricula. However, in terms of Asian students, you still have this overbearing pressure from family to say, look, you've got to do law, you've got to do one of the other subjects. So there's always that deep lying question about, even if a student comes in to do photography, will they sustain that practice? And we are seeing some Asian male and female photographers who are beginning to sustain their practice. However, the other thing can be argued, the sustaining the practice, because one is very susceptible to the needs within what's happening with Black Lives Matters and Black History Month. So there could be this tokenistic aspect of we're going to fund certain photographers. But then when that funding runs out, how do you sustain that practice? How do they sustain that practice? You can't just accept that you're going to get funding from various places to continue that body of work. So you've got to create that place where you can sell the work. So going back many years ago, that's why I opened a gallery to sell my work. But now, looking at what I'm doing and continue to do, I think I've learned in terms of where I can place it and hopefully still gain a market to create a place for my work to succeed. But then also, I do ask the questions about where do you think your practice is going? It's fine that you're creating work about identity, self-representation, about your Sikh background or your Muslim background. But where does this go? Who's going to see it? But I know the galleries that would exhibit that. I know where it will be held, etc. But they need to sustain it. So over the years, I have had parents that have come to open day and then they approach me and say, Max, we wanted to meet you because, hey, we've seen your profile and we just wanted to know, how did you succeed by getting this position in academia? Have you sustained your practice coming from the background you come from? And it's no different than how I would speak to any parent by saying it's hard work. If you're going to be a successful lawyer, you've got to work hard, or you're going to go into medicine. And I have to say, it's no different than working within the context of, say, fine art photography or within a commercial context. I know the amount of work you guys have put in, because I remember when I first approached you many years ago to come and speak to the students, I did a lot of work looking at your profile and saying, where are you coming from? What are you going to say, etc. So we do that research, and I can see that commitment. So it comes down to commitment. I do think we need to look at how to sustain that beyond undergrad, master's to PhD level as well, in terms of also academics working within the context of art. And there's a lack of Black and Asian academics working in that environment. Mm-hmm. Nottingham for me, and again, many people have asked me this question about my position at Nottingham. And I would say that my place at Nottingham has always been supported 101% in terms of being a senior lecturer, heading the department in my research, and also because I made the decision earlier on that I got the hook into academia, I got addicted to it, but I wanted to keep my practice. But then also working within certain projects and then representing not just myself, but then the other thing is you're representing your university. So when I'm in New York, it's not just Max, it's Nottingham Trent University. So the projects I work on, I would raise external funding and my university would support that as well. So within that context, they've been very, very supportive in terms of what they want, in terms of diversity representation.
What piece of advice would you say you give most often to your students? I mean, I'm sure they all kind of come up to you and say, Max, finish the course. I'm trying to get out there now, and I want to do this for my living. Apart from what we would say, work hard. Is there anything else that you say? Because I know you do so much mentorship and you offer guidance to so many of your students about putting on exhibitions and selling prints, but is there kind of a list, a hit list, I guess, that you say to guys, look, this is all, and women, this is what in my advice, you need to do now at the next stage? I'm sure you have loads of conversations like that.
I wish I had a magic wand to say, yes, I have, but it takes me back to when I started, and that hasn't really changed. I was told, you do 80% paperwork, admin, and 20% photography. And when you talk in the industry, that really hasn't changed. My advice is the amount of graduates that the work I see, and it's extraordinary work. I mean, some of the work, it really is quite beautiful what they make. And it's challenging, and you want them to do so well. But the advice I give, you've got to absolutely manage your day by day, week by week. That's how I did it. And that's when I'm looking at, let's say, the last 5 years and looking at graduates, what they do. When the work comes, make the work. If you're working and creating your own work and it's about what you want to do it. But then also have family time, have downtime. Don't just keep getting wound up about social media, what needs to be done, what so-and-so's doing or so-and-so's doing. I look at social media and I see a lot of my friends, peers, etc., making extraordinarily good work, and I'm very happy and proud of what they do. However, it won't shift me in my vision and what I want, because I know how other photographers work, and I've got a lot of respect for them. But it's about keeping a real sense of perspective about your practice. And you're right, investing in equipment, etc. I was looking at cameras the other day. I was looking at the Sony R7 and the Fuji 50S. It's extraordinary money about, say, buying. I don't own a digital camera. I've just got analog, and I want to buy a new digital. I want to buy my first digital camera, and it's a big investment. But the bottom line is, what always kept me going was no one could take my work away from me. That was my holy grail. If things aren't going well, I'd come and go to my studio at the time, but now you can come to your desktop, you can edit work, you can start managing, and really keeping a sense of perspective where you are at the moment. Because time, if you are committed, your time will come. And just, it's a good friend of mine, Giacomelli, I call him Gio, and I remember for about 5-6 years, he was presenting his work at different festivals, showing work. Very talented photographer. His work is called The Animals. His first book. He went into the second edition. He's doing lots more work, and we'd have lots of late nights talking about work, reviewing people's portfolios, presenting work here and there, and then suddenly got the work published. Prints are selling, and that was over a period of 6 or 7 years. He just put his head down and worked on that project, and he succeeded because he fine-tuned it. He's an exceptionally talented photographer, and the body of work is not just 1 or 2 images, it's a collection of work, beautifully made. But he had to see a lot of people. He had to talk, you had to have a dialogue. And sometimes when you sit down across a table with various curators and you suddenly think, oh, I've done this so many times. Yeah, that's the way it is. You've got to keep doing it and doing it. But it's about managing also your expectations and keep making it work.
You know, there's a story that I was thinking about the other day, I know you remember this. So our agent that we had, you know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we would always sit down with them and have meetings and say, you know, why are we not booking more advertising jobs? We can do this. And they're like, you know, it's hard to get meetings at agencies. You know, it's not easy to go and show your book. And we were getting really frustrated, right? And we found this company called Bikini Lists. You remember them, right? Where they have a list of all, just basically for photographers, advertising agencies. And I spoke to the owner. I said, how does it work? And he said, well, what you do is this: you send out your newsletter, right? Then you see who's opened your newsletter. And those people that have opened it, you've got to call them up. And then you've got to call them up and book a meeting. And then you could go and see them. And I said to Amit, okay, so this is what we've got to do. And I was like, this doesn't sound like photography. This sounds like sales, right? But I said, fine, we're going to try it. So we put out some newsletters. And then we saw that over a number of a couple of newsletters, we had, I think, 100 opens. So we then had the names. He had 50, I had 50. He was another room, I was another room. It's calling up these ad agencies. Hi, can I want to make a meeting with Peter, blah, blah, blah. I hated every single second of it. Didn't you? I'm like, we didn't want to do it. I hated it, but we still did it. And even then, you don't get through to the right person. Oh, leave a follow-up email. And it is so difficult to do.
It is.
But eventually, we got a few meetings. But then how many people would just stop and say, 1 minute, I'm meant to be creating work. I don't want to be ringing up people. But that's what you have to do. That's why, and that then eliminates the, you know, it kind of puts you in a category of your own, that you're willing to do this job that this other people will not want to do because they don't think it's part of the process. But like you said, 20% shooting, 80% admin. You know, you've got to put the work, you've got to meet the people. So it just kind of reminds me of that story because I'll never forget it, because thank God we don't have to do that now. Right, but we did do that, and that was quite a few times we did that. And I remember looking at Amit, they'll see how many he's got left to do. He'd look at me, and we would absolutely hate it. But no, it's a funny story. But it just kind of came to mind, this whole idea of that, this networking, meeting people, trying to get out there. But Max, it's been fantastic having you on this discussion. As we kind of wrap up, I just wanted to ask you: do you have any other issues, any other thoughts that you'd like to share as we kind of sign off about this lack of diversity? So it's something that can get us thinking, because you know we're very passionate about trying to instigate change, and even though we're doing discussions, we want to actually take action and do things. And once COVID's over, you know, once we can actually meet people, because I think going into places is gonna, and speaking to people directly and having that face-to-face contact is gonna have maximum impact. Is there anything else that you'd like to end on and share your thoughts on this lack of color and how, you know, you can see it changing in the future and what needs to get done?
I think what you guys are doing, that's a starting point. Our discussion and the discussions that you've had previously, when I was part of the APH discussion on diversity, we touched upon it there. I think it's being present in the now and having a voice, and that voice is heard in specific places. For me, it's about the curricula as well, from an education perspective, a balance of curricula. For example, if we're looking at, say, fashion photography, why can't there be a balance of representation of who's presented? And the questions posed to me, maybe other people need to be educated, the type of work that needs to be presented to provide a balance, not because you have to tick the box and have a quota. I don't believe in that. But my argument there is I've had to learn about photography. So when I became very aware of the curricula, and in my learning, in my formative years, I had to learn, I had to look at actually who are the Black and Asian photographers. And this was in the 90s. And I had to learn and do my research as a Punjabi Sikh photographer. So that should apply to everybody. So if people are dealing with landscape or trauma and people are presenting the same types of photographers, I would put my hand up and say, well, look at Kalpash's work. You know, Dhruv Malhotra is a brilliant Indian photographer who did this work called The Sleepers about 10 years ago, and it's beautifully executed. So it's a balance, not to force it. the change will be subtle, but it has to be a natural cultural change. And photographers working in that context have to be presented and represented. But then also, when you look at what's on the reading list, who selects the reading list? So on social media, sometimes people put the best 10 photographers, and I'll look at it and they're all white. Mm-hmm. I haven't got a problem with that, because all 10, I know some I don't know because I passed away a long time ago. Some of them I really do respect. And they're doing extraordinarily good work, but it's not thinking, it's being biased, and it's Black Lives Matter, Black History Month, and all the other issues that we will be dealing with in the future. They will bring the community together because of certain traumas will happen. So everyone will come together, we'll black out a screen, we'll have discussions, but that's not good enough. It has to be consistently done, absolutely consistently done. And it's not deliberately done to say, well, we have to look at this photography because I don't want you to look at this. No, I'm presenting work on landscapes next week, and there's some great work done by an American photographer called Gossage on the pond. I quite like the work, and I'll present it, and I'll put it into context with other photographers. So it's not being dismissive, it's actually showing that work, but then also introducing photographers from various agencies like Autograph, introducing your work within that commercial context. Sam Robinson, who I talked to you about, he's an alumni of mine, and he's opened agencies, and he's invited lots of different alumni to work with him and the work he's doing. But what it is about having a quality and not being biased. But that comes with people doing their research, not letting other, we can notify people, say, look at this, look at that. But actually, as an educator and someone working in the field, it's up to you to do it. I'm sorry, or maybe I'm being harsh at that. Mm-hmm. I'm always researching photographers, always looking at work, always wanting to know what's happening, who's the new up and coming photographer, who's changing things. And saying something, but their platform is put in a place where they communicate to all walks of life and people. Look at Shyla Burma's work at Tate Modern. You've seen Shyla's work, that beautiful sculptural pieces. Shyla's a photographer from Liverpool. Yes, she is from Liverpool. And I'm very familiar with her work. And she's got this amazing platform at the Tate. Fantastic work, and now I'm getting inquiries from some of my students. Max, do you know Shyla, or do you know the work? Yes, I brought it to you 2 years ago. I brought Shyla's work to the curricula 8 years ago, etc., etc. So these platforms will open up, but it's about a very natural, organic process that it actually enters the dialogue, the critique of photography.
Amazing, man. Max, thank you so much, man. We've taken up more of your time than we were told, but you've offered
it's a pleasure.
So much valuable insight, and we're definitely going to be working with you in the future. It's stuff that we want to do. I think your voice, your experience, your understanding, where you come from, offers so much value to people, and this whole idea of educating people, I think it is the key thing. And I think a lot can be done there. So we're definitely going to be doing a lot more in the future. Thank you once again. And yeah, that's all I can say. Thank you for your time, man. Really, really appreciate it.